And I would recommend centering your learning around projects, because that is the easiest way to get things to stick with you. So finding things on YouTube that are going to teach you relevant skills, foundational skills, and then finishing these projects. This is kind of the biggest thing that I wish I did when I started, was finish the projects you start.
السلام عليكم، يعطيكم العافية وحياكم الله في الحلقة 44 من بودكاست منير. ضيفنا اليوم كان Chunck Trafagander، واحد من الضيوف المميزين بالنسبة لي. أكثر شخص اشتريت له كورسات وشاهدت له مقاطع. في وجهة نظري يعتبر من أفضل الناس اللي يشرحون ويقدمون محتوى تعليمي في ال3D. عنده كورسات في يوديمي، أيضا كان متعاون مع فليب نورمالز حق يسوي لهم كورسات، أيضا تعاون مع سيجي كوكيز يسوي لهم مقاطع توتوريالز، وعنده أيضا قناته الخاصة في اليوتيوب. كانت محادثة رائعة صراحة، وساعتين ما حسيت فيهم أبدا. تقدرون تشغلون الترجمة الأوتوماتيكية العربية. للأسف أنه بس تشتغل على أجهزة الحاسب ولا تشتغل على الجوالات. أتمنى أنكم تستمتعون. لا تنسون اللايك والشير والسبسكرايب وتقييمات في منصات البودكاست. بس حاب أشكركم لأن أعداد التحميل في منصات البودكاست ارتفعت، وأنا فعلا أشكركم وأشكر كل شخص دخل وحمل الحلقات. ولو أنت ودك أنك تدعمنا، ادخل وحمل الحلقات، بعد هذا راح يساعد البودكاست بشكل كبير جدا. Chunck, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. All fine. I hope I'm like pronouncing your name good.
Yeah. Honestly, it's funny because my name, Chunck, is not obviously my birth name. That's not really my actual name. It's more like an artist name I've adopted. Mm-hmm. And it came out of like a mispronunciation or a typo, really. A couple years ago when I was in university, I was doing a group paper with a couple of my classmates, and I went to put Chuck as my name on the essay, and I hit the N key accidentally, and it became Chunck. And that's why it's also spelled differently than you'll see Chunck normally spelled, right? It has the extra C. And I thought that was so funny that I just told everybody, you have to start calling me Chunck now, because that's hilarious. And then everyone started calling me that. And then it just kind of became a thing. And then I kind of started my YouTube around that time. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to put my name on it per se, because I have a pretty unique name. Like, it's very easy to search up. Mm-hmm. So I thought, like, you know what? I'll just use Chunck because that's funny. Whatever, people are not going to get it, and that's going to be funnier. And it kind of just stuck because Chunck is also very unique. Like, you're not going to forget a guy named Chunck, especially when it's spelt wrong. Like, so it just kind of became like my artist name. And then I'm like, you know what? That's fantastic. But now everybody I meet who's never actually met me before, but has maybe like heard my voice through tutorials and stuff, they're like, wow, like, you're really skinny. I'm like, yeah, and then you have to go through the whole backstory again, because it's like, it's not indicative of my body. Like, it's me just not being good at typing. So,
and I think you're always making a joke of that in your tutorials, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like, just trying to like keep it nice and funny. Like, I think it's part of the fun in it too, with my name, with going by Chunck, is that everybody can kind of pronounce it differently, because even though I pronounce it one way, it was a mess up to begin with. Yeah. So like, who's to say that's even the way that it should be pronounced? Yeah. You can say it however you want, really.
Yeah. You know, like, my name in Arabic means an object which radiates light. Okay. So,
okay.
You know, I've never thought about it until I got old.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you call someone a name, you just forget about what does it mean.
Yeah.
And my mom loved that name, and she was like, yeah, let's call him an object that radiates light.
So specific, really. That's hilarious. So, do you feel like that really resonates with your life now? You're like, yes, I am the object that resonates life or light.
Well, like, if I say yes, it's going to sound narcissistic, honestly.
No. It's a humble brag. Humble brag.
Well, I don't know. I have no idea. Honestly, I
Yeah.
want to be an object that radiates light.
Well, that's the first step. That's the first step to making it happen.
Well, honestly, Chunck, thanks so much for coming to the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And it's it's an Arabic podcast, but I do a couple of episodes. Like every now and then, I do a couple of episodes in English, and it's really it's refreshing to talk in English. I got really tired of talking in Arabic in the podcast, honestly.
Well, good luck translating me into Arabic. So
that's going to take a lot of work, honestly.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm really excited to talk to you because I've done a lot of your tutorials, and honestly, you have one of the greatest tutorials out there, honestly. And it's weird. I told you before we started recording. It's weird, like talking to someone who has been listening to for hours. It's weird. And
yeah, you're like, this guy has a body, like he's a person. He's just not some disembodied voice. Yeah.
So but before we get into all of that, I just wanted to, I love to start with the question is, how the hell did you get into 3D?
So it's hard to really pinpoint a specific time or date or really a reason, but I think the biggest reason was I wanted to mod video games. Like a lot of the Bethesda games, like mods were really a big part of their life cycle. And I guess I just started realizing, like, it's not like professionals making these mods. It's people like me just sitting, at home, like in their bedroom, just making these mods. And I was like, how do people do that? Like, I had no idea 3D modeling packages, software was a thing. I thought, like, pretty much like everyone's, parents or grandmother thinks, like, you go into coding and you then become a 3D artist through coding. Like, which, I mean, technically nowadays you can to a certain degree, but that's not where I was going with that. I think I just wanted to make mods, and I ended up researching online, like, how do you make 3D model mods, whatever. And things like Blender and Max and Maya came up, and I was like, oh, like there's whole software packages for this stuff. And then you start looking into it and you're like, there's entire communities, there's like schooling for this. It's just crazy. So I just wanted to make, like, I think the first thing I wanted to do is make a boot mod for just like new boots in like Oblivion or Skyrim or something. And to this day, I still have never made that mod. So I immediately discarded mods as soon as I got into 3D modeling. I'm like, no, we're going to do much more.
This is how many years back?
So I was just going into the 9th grade. So I was 14 at the time. So this was 10 years ago, 2011, around there. I got into I started with Max. I started with 3ds Max, and it was okay. And then I started with Maya because, when you're first learning, you're like, what is the best 3D modeling package, right? Because
exactly.
You think there's an objective answer to that. And you're like, you need to know Max or Maya because the industry standard and all that. And so I'm like, okay, I'll try those. And they didn't really stick. Again, back then it was really hard. Like 2011, it was hard to find tutorials online that were free because I was 13 or 14, right? I didn't really have much money to pay for courses. And then I just kind of stumbled into Blender, free, open source, and a buttload of tutorials. Like, some of them were good. Most of them were not great in 2011, I'll admit, but there were some that were really good. And I was like, okay, like there's more tutorials for this package. So like this is the one I'm going to be able to learn the best. And then I got into Blender, and I hated it. I hated it so much. I stopped 3D altogether. I'm like, hate this. It's stupid. Why can't I click on anything? My left click is not working. And I got so mad, like pretty much everyone that starts, or at least started Blender before they added, the improvements to user experience. And I stopped it for about 6 months. And then I kind of just got nostalgic for it, I think. It's like, oh, remember 6 months ago? Good times. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to start doing it again. And I really sat down to learn it. And then it's just been smooth sailing ever since.
Yeah. Like I had the same experience. This is in 2018. Obviously in 2018, there were a lot of tutorials. And, but the thing is, I downloaded Blender first. I Googled how do I get into 3D or games and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I downloaded Blender. Then I watched Blender Guru tutorial of making the donut.
Oh yeah,
donuts.
The donut.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a rite of passage.
Yes, it is. And but like immediately after I finished that tutorial, I was like, no, I'm not going to do 3D, and I uninstalled the Blender. But then after like a couple of weeks, I was like, no, I'll go back and download it again. I'll try to do it again. But like this, you mentioned something that people are always like saying that you have to learn Max, you have to learn Maya, you have to learn Blender and stuff. And this is something that like anyone who's new to this field is thinking about that, like which is the best program. And I was like this before, and you also the same, you had the same experience. And honestly, this, like looking back at it, I feel so stupid, honestly. For some reason,
that's growth. That's just growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, because the thing is, I'm still like, I'm seeing people fight over this all the time. And when you see when you see a piece and someone in the comments is like, I can do this in Blender. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
One of the reasons actually in this podcast, I ask this question a lot. Okay, so repeated exposure is going to what do you call it? How can I say that? Repeated exposure is going to solidify this idea that these are just tools. Have you ever had this experience? Someone fighting with you over the tools?
Generally, I'm the one fighting about the tools. So I don't know. Put me in the hot seat here. Let
me give you a context.
Okay.
2 days ago, someone on Facebook sent me a render. He did a creature and he sent me a render. Actually, 2 renders, one in Blender and one with Maya. It was a default render. Like I think he added one light and stuff like that. Very basic. And he was like, see, Maya is much more better. I was like, dude, it doesn't matter. It's all about the fundamentals. You're talking about lighting here and stuff like that. He said no. And he started arguing. Like, nowadays, I'm not arguing with anyone. Like, eventually I told him, you're comfortable with Maya? He said yes. Go ahead. I told him, okay, just use it. If you're comfortable, just use it. That's what I'm like. A lot of people, they want to convince you that, no, this is much more better. You have to do this. And this is actually stupid, like, in my opinion.
At the end of the day, anybody trying to argue about why one software is better than the other from like an objective stance, I don't think they know enough about the software that they're trying to push or the software that they're having a stance against. Because like really at the end of the day, really what I think you said it yourself, it's all the same. It's all the fundamentals. And then these tools are set up in different ways to really try and achieve the same tasks. And we're at a point now where it doesn't really matter which one piece of software you use, because they're pretty much even across the board with their own kind of I guess, advantages in different areas. But anybody that tells you that they have an answer to all of life's problems, right, is someone you have to run away from. And it's kind of the same thing with software. Like, nobody is going to be able to convince you that one software is objectively better. It's more of which workflow do you enjoy the most, because Blender and Maya and Max have very distinct and specific workflows. I think maybe Maya and Max a little bit closer just because they're under the same parent company, but still very different in their own right. It's a matter of what did you learn when you were first learning, because that's the fundamental workflow and, like, ideology of how 3D works. And that's how it's going to shape you, basically. And really, at the end of the day, does it have all of the tools in a nice, convenient, streamlined fashion that are going to allow you to get the job done you need to? I choose Blender because, like I said, I liked its workflow the best because it had the biggest community, and I've just, for better or worse, learned Blender's workflow. So now it makes sense to me, but I've been helping some of my coworkers kind of get into Blender, and they're like, you can just do this in like 1-2 clicks and like Max or Maya. And, it makes you think, like, yeah, you know what? Like, maybe Blender is not great in this particular area. But I think anybody that's going to fight about software has not really, it's just wasted energy. Yeah. It just is wasted energy.
Exactly. So the other thing is, when I started, I was fighting myself either to be a specialist or a generalist. All right. When I started, I was like, okay, so I've done nursing school. This is not going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
So I wanted,
yes and no. Yeah.
So I wanted to learn everything. I was telling myself that I'm going to be an environment artist. I'm going to be a character artist. I'm going to do rig. I'm going to do animation. I'm going to do all sorts of things. But eventually, reality check hit me so hard, and later on I was like, at least for me, I can't be a generalist. I just can't. So you're a 3D generalist, right?
The more I get into it, the more I do consider myself a generalist, kind of by means of self-preservation, almost. Really.
Look, at least from someone who's not like myself, I'm not working in the industry. So 3D generalist, sometimes for me, it's a vague term. Mm-hmm. So what does it mean to be a 3D generalist, actually?
I think you're pretty on the money there with it being vague, really, because it can kind of mean what you need it to. It's a bit of a gripe of mine when you see job postings online where it's like looking for a 3D generalist, and it does a very bare bones attempt to really describe to you what the job's actually going to entail, because it goes, you need to know 3D modeling, sculpting, baking, rigging, animating, textures, materials, environment art. It's like, okay, those are like 7 different jobs that you're trying to just fit into one job. And that's not really what I think a generalist is. Being a generalist for me is being able to, or at least being willing to try and tackle different aspects of production when is necessary, but you're not going to be able to know everything. And certainly if you do know everything, you're not going to be good at everything. For me, how I kind of got into being a generalist is that I enjoyed seeing things through their entire completion. So if it was a character, right? Well, there's character art, and there's, I think garment art or like clothing art kind of falls into character art, but I do think it is its own separate type of art form. There's rigging, right? Which is a totally different thing. Then there's animation. And I was really interested in all of the steps into the final thing for games. And so I would get bored very easily. When I got comfortable with one thing, it was like, okay, that's time to put that down. Let's move on to something else, just out of pure interest, really. So for me, like being a generalist is someone who's interested in doing a lot of different things, but they're not going to be the best at it. I think generalists are generally the people who are kind of the glue to a certain degree, where they're supporting people who maybe specialize a little bit more, and bringing those different departments kind of together, because they're good at doing a lot of different specialist jobs, but they leave a lot of the, I guess, bulk of the heavy stuff, that's very specific to the people that specialize. In terms of whether it's better to be a generalist or a specialist, from a career, what I've seen is that it's easier to go into specialization and then become general. So it's easier to be like, okay, I'm just going to be the guy that sculpts rocks, and I just make rocks, right? And you get really, really good at sculpting rocks. I've seen a lot more people who specialize into certain things getting into, AAA industry and stuff, then finally get in, and then they start learning other things from their coworkers. For me personally, I had no idea how to do any foliage art assets, trees and grass and environment stuff. That was kind of outside of my wheelhouse. But I got into the job that I'm working at right now because I was, by and large, kind of a material textures guy. I think you could kind of consider that maybe one of my more specialized skills. And I now know how to use speed tree and do foliage and that whole workflow and that pipeline, which I've learned through work and through my coworkers. But I would say that I came at it from a specialized standpoint first. So it's really tough to give one or the other as like, this is what you should do versus this is what you should do. It's really, what do you have to do that's going to satisfy where you want to go, what you want to do, and really the roles that you're going to want to see yourself in. With specialization, you can get kind of burnt out by being the rock guy and only ever doing rocks for 10 years,
Definitely.
So you're going to want to you're going to want to leave yourself open, I think, from a career standpoint and a professional, personal growth standpoint. Leave yourself open to being able to grow into different things if that kind of strikes you at some point later on in your life.
Yeah. Like this is actually, for me at least, this is a very important question, because I struggled for a whole year, because when you go into the internet and you start reading, and people are like, yeah, you have to specialize, and other people would be like, no, a generalist is better. Then like when I sat with myself, I was like, okay, what should I do? Environment, animation, characters, and it's very hard for me, at least, because I was like, artistically, I wasn't like, I did not have that story where like I was drawing when I was 1 year old and stuff like that.
Ahead of his time, just Rembrandt. Yeah.
Like honestly, I was just playing video games, and I got inspired by that, because a lot of people especially character artists. I've seen this with character artists, character artists I talk with here in the podcast. When I ask them how they got into 3D, they would be like, well, we were drawing when we were kids, and we were drawing comics and like stuff like that, and yeah, we did. So we decided to go to be like 3D character artists. But like for someone who wasn't interested in all of these kind of things, it's very difficult, because honestly, I'm interested in all of these things. And that's like, the struggle came from there, actually.
And that, like I was saying, that is a struggle that I know all too well personally. And I guess I'm going to also just kind of flip on everything I just said, because I've also worked freelance for a couple years. And the difference between working, I would say, in like a AAA industry, AA industry versus working in a freelance or maybe more indie realm is that sometimes generalists are really bred out of necessity. Working freelance, you kind of have to just be able to do whatever work comes your way. So being able to rig and animate characters and also do props and environment art, you might have to do that. And it's not going to be necessarily the best work you've ever done, but it has its place as well. And I know when I was working indie, I would, do everything from QA to then modeling to then some animation and rigging and stuff. So it was all over the place. But depending on where you want to go, I think that those two avenues have different advantages to them. But staying curious, I think overall is the best way for you to grow, and you'll find how you want to go about doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Since you mentioned that you were working as a freelancer, I was curious, like, when did you get your first job, your first gig?
I would say my first in studio, like working on a game job, was 2017. I think I was in my second year of university, because one of my professors so I did a university college split program. And so one of the professors at the college that I was going to, I obviously had him as a professor, and he had a game studio that he would do kind of as like his full time and then teaching as his part time. And so I just kind of bugged the shit out of him to be like, hey, like, let me come be an intern here. Like, I'll do a summer internship. You don't have to pay me. Like, I just want to come and work on something. And so he's like, okay, like, polish up your portfolio and send me some stuff. And I would bug him occasionally, like, hey, what do you think of this? Is this good or bad? Like, I need some indication. And he's like, yeah, all right, I think I can allocate some funds. Like, I'm not going to make you work for free. Like, I'm very appreciative of him for one, taking me on, and two, not using me as free labor. Like, I know a lot of studios would. So he said, yeah, in the summer when you're not going to school anymore and you're just kind of living, you can come work with me. You can do some QA and a little bit of modeling for a game that they were working on. And that was kind of my first baby steps or baby crawl into the industry. Is like, okay, nice. I can at least have something on my portfolio where it's like, I worked on a game. It's not Call of Duty, but it is something that I can say I worked on. And it was nice because I got to go to school and do work kind of simultaneously for a couple years there. And I could work at on my own timeline. So if I only did one day a week, that was totally okay. So I really lucked out with getting that gig. It was a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah, like how did it feel like working for the first time? Because I'm asking this because when I think about it, my comfort zone is, like, for example, in the ICU. Like, it feels
so high stress. So
it is. Like,
yeah,
like people are dying. You have to be quick. You have to think all the time. You have to, like, a lot of things. But that is my comfort zone. When I think about it, when I think about working in a studio, honestly, I feel a bit worried about it. I have no idea why. So how did it feel like for you working for the first time there?
Well, I think it's because it's the unknown, right?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know what to expect. And I think my first experience was something different, but also very much par for the course in terms of what your first studio gig is and what working at an indie studio is. It was very laid back to a point where it's like, okay, I'm like really new. I need some direction. So the first little bit, it was, I'll be honest, like I was very anxious just because you don't want to fuck it up, right? You're like, this is my first thing. I don't want to mess it up. I look back on it now and think like, oh man, I could have gotten away with murder for, like working there. But it was very, very scary. And I knew like most of the people that worked at this studio too. It's not like I was meeting new people really. And I was still terrified because it's like, everything starts like imposter syndrome starts to kick in too. You're like, oh, he's going to realize I'm a hack and like, he's going to fire me, but then he's also going to be my teacher next year. So it's like, it's going to be double awkward. So a lot of it was just me really getting super anxious, building up the paranoia for yourself. But then you quickly, you learn the culture of the studio, you learn the people you're working with, and you learn where you kind of fall into place, right? I think a big thing for me was realizing like, even though I wasn't tackling a lot of I wasn't tackling the sexy things of game development, like, modeling the main character or like doing the set dressing for the environments. It was like, no, you're going to be like, you're going to put some rocks here and like, you're going to sculpt, do like model the grass blades and stuff. And you're like, okay, you still feel important to the actual production of it. And I think for people that anyone that's just kind of getting into their first gig is really try to take pride, even if you're not doing the sexy stuff, try and take pride and feel, how do I say this? Just try to take pride in the things that you're doing, even as small as they might seem, because it will really build up the more and more, the longer you work there, obviously. You're like, wow, I really did contribute a lot to the project. And if you feel like you can take on more, managers or producers or leads would love you to do more work. It's never about having not enough work to do. It's like, okay, we can't give our employees this much work. So if you're like, I want to take on more, they would love to hear that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to ask you the next question. It's going to feel weird.
Okay.
But the thing is, I'll give you context. Throughout this podcast, I've recorded almost now 38 or 39 episodes. And
damn, congrats, first of all.
Thanks. There is like one common theme with expert artists or people who've been in the industry for a while. They're, I wouldn't say depressed, I would say
jaded with experience. Yeah, okay.
No, honestly, I would say, like, I don't know what could I use, but I would say exhausted. Like, okay, I'll go with exhausted.
Okay.
When I talk, like, I recorded an episode the day before, like yesterday, and the guy was a character artist. And he even worked in Brazil for almost 3 years. And he's from Egypt. And for 1 hour and a half, a lot of, he kept on saying, guys, this is so difficult. Guys, prepare yourself. It takes years. Guys, this is difficult. Okay? And this is a common theme in with people who've been in the industry for a while. So, and a lot of them, they thought about quitting 3D. And like, honestly, I don't know, because I don't think it's because of like 3D itself. I think it's related to work and stuff like that. So have you ever thought about quitting 3D?
Every day.
Oh.
I've thought about it every day, but I know that I wouldn't want to do anything else. And I say it in jest or in joke. I don't think about quitting every day, but there are certain times where you're like, this is just. Actually, I'll take a step back. I think why exhausted or exhaustion is a common theme is because with art and productions, like work like that, right, where you're actually producing a final product, i.e., games, you really pour a lot of yourself into it, creatively, right? Thought-wise, like actually trying to overcome problems, which are rampant in games. It's exhausting because it is a full body experience, mind, emotion, physically, it takes a toll. And when times get tough in game production, that's when it's like, okay, is this really worth it? Like, should I quit and just become a farmer in like, Heartland, Canada or whatever? And I think that's the times where it's like, I think it's the most telling really of how much of a grip and a hold that video games has over a lot of people like me, where you're like, oh, this sucks. Like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm like creatively bankrupt right now. But you're like, what else would I do? Like, I know I'd leave for a week and then I'd be like, man, I just want to like model some more trees and stuff. Like I'm this whole farming thing is not really, I'm not cut out for it. And, I think it's maybe a little bit different for people who are genuinely burnt out. I think that's a whole different conversation to have. But I think by and large, I think it's a reality check for me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I could quit, but I really do like what I'm doing 95% of the time. It's just that 5% of the time that is really the big suck.
yeah. Like, I do understand. The thing is, in one of the episodes, I interviewed, I did a podcast with an animator who worked on the next Spider-Man, No Way Home, I guess.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy was, honestly, I cut out a lot of things he said because it's related to the place he worked in, and he told me like, we have to cut this off and out. But the thing is, he was exhausted, he was tired, and he was like, I had the worst experience ever there. Okay, and one guy in the comments was like, if this guy worked in Spider-Man and he's not comfortable, I'm quitting this shit.
Well, and you know what? Like, I can't obviously speak for any of those studios because I don't really know. But like I was saying, some people genuinely are burnt out, and it is a rampant issue depending on where you go, and not even just games, but like film and stuff like that. The whole kind of I don't want to say CG industry, but I think it kind of conveys the best point. It is a struggle, and for big productions like that, I could see it definitely taking its toll on people. And that's where it's like, okay, is this like burnout, or is this just fantasizing about working on a farm? So
I don't understand, like, because the thing is, I'm trying to, conceptualize that in my mind. Like, because like I'm trying to combine two fields. Like, I'm working in the hospital, and my dream is to work in a studio. And the kind of stress you have here and there, the kind of stress you face, is totally different. And I just can't understand. Honestly, I can't understand. I did not try it. I have to go there. I have to work in a studio to understand it. So, I was thinking, like, I was telling one of my friends, he used to work in a studio in the UK, and I told him, I have faced the stress of someone dying in front of me. Does that compare to the stress in the studio? And He was like, I have no idea, honestly. And but the thing is, but he told me something, like, he made me think about it. He told me the stress in the hospital is for you trying to save someone else. The struggle in the stress in the studio, that you're trying to save yourself. I don't know if that makes sense or not, actually. But he made me think about it, actually. He made me think about it.
No, I was almost going to say something almost exactly like that, but it was like more morbid. But it was very on the point with that, where the difference is the hospital, right? You're basically living for others, whereas in the studio, it's you trying to stay afloat sometimes. And that very well may be indicative of a studio that's not managed well enough, where they don't feel that they have the support of who they work with and the higher ups. I think a lot of that exhaustion, like we were talking about previously, is it's external pressures, right?
Yeah.
Nobody gets that worked up because they're like, oh my God, my texture is like it's too red. Like I need to dial back the red on Spider-Man's suit, right? It's more like, okay, you need to like get this done like yesterday, and you need to do 6 other textures. And if you don't, like, you're going to have to work overtime. It's those pressures that are coming up from a more business side of things, or more managerial aspect, producer side of things. And navigating that as an artist, or as any employee, right? And you have to remember, you at the end of the day are an employee. A lot of places may try and take liberties with the fact that you are just an employee, and well, we're a family, and who else gets to just like work on video games every day? Like, that's sweet. Working on a video game and playing a video game are 2 totally different things.
Yeah.
I would love to be playing video games all day. Working on video games all day is really not at all as enjoyable or as fun as playing it. But I was going to mention another point too, just on your topic of working in the ICU versus, a more unfamiliar aspect of working in a studio. There's then 2 whole different worlds around working in a AAA studio and working in an indie studio, of things that you need to worry about. Working in a AAA studio, for me, it's like, okay, I'm not worried about finances as much, but I'm definitely worried about, am I going to be competitive enough to stay kind of in this job and with my peers and my coworkers, right? And am I going to get things done on the deadlines? Because there's a lot more deadlines with big projects that have very tight schedules, versus working at an indie where it's like, you almost, depending on where you work, even if you're not in charge of any of the business sense of the company, it is a concern because you're a small independent studio. Like, how is your studio getting funded? With the studio that I worked at, I ultimately got laid off because of funding, not because of any of my work or anything. It was just a matter of circumstance, because it was a small studio and they just needed to downsize a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's different, again, external pressures even between the 2 studio sizes, that plays a factor that I guess you don't really think about unless you've maybe experienced one or the other or both. And it's like, okay, what am I willing to live with? I am willing to live with, not hitting a deadline and then getting reprimanded if I don't. And reprimanded, it's more like, okay, how can we get this asset done, and then, push that to another schedule. But I'm more willing to live with not hitting a deadline than I am willing to live with getting laid off 1, 2, 3 more times working at an independent studio. But it might be different for you, or it might be different for, whoever's watching this. It's like, yeah, you know what? But I want to work at an indie because I like the various aspects that come with it. And I don't really want to have the pressure of, a producer on me or like a manager on me or something that kind of comes with the AAA realm of things.
Yeah, I do understand that. One of the guys I talked to, he said he worked with big studios, and when I talked to him, he told me, I don't want to work with AAA games now at all. I'm okay with going to an indie studio, and I'm okay with modeling a paper. Just give me a paper to model. I'll model it. I'll be happy. I'll go home. I'll sit with my family and stuff like that. So it's really a struggle. Someone had I have to try it myself to understand it eventually. And
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say it's the most surefire way to know, but sometimes it's, the opportunity is not always present to
definitely
do that.
You mentioned like layoffs, and this will get me into my next question, which is, do artists need a side hustle in order to maintain their finances? Because this is something I think about all the time. Because if I quit my job right now and I go to studio, and for some reason I got laid off, I need a source of income eventually. So do I have to have a side hustle as an artist?
I would never suggest that you don't have a side hustle. I think it's never a bad idea, plain and simply. So now let me rant about it for 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, go ahead. I would love to listen.
No, I don't think I'm going to rant that long, but in my experience, it's never been a bad idea. And I think it actually opens a lot more doors for you going forward. For me, most of my career has happened for me because of my YouTube channel. The whole reason really we're talking right now is because my YouTube channel was something that I did for fun, and it was enough for me to leverage working with CG Cookie and working with Flip Normals to then start doing courses, where I believe that's maybe the first kind of time you had maybe seen me before. And so my YouTube channel is, again, also how I got really my primary career. So even though it was a stepping stone, I still consider it a nice side hustle to have, because it opens yourself up to a lot of opportunities and interacting with people that I don't think you'd really get the opportunity otherwise. So from a networking perspective, I think having a side hustle is a good idea. In terms of finances, really, especially right now, is any job truly a secure job? Maybe working in public health, I guess, right now. But I think having the ability to have, even if it's a passive income right now, having those kind of monthly paychecks from Udemy or Gumroad or Patreon or whatever you decide to do, it pays for car payments. It pays for a mortgage payment or part of a mortgage payment, just real life factors that you have to live with, that you can then go, okay, I have some supplementary income incoming. Now it's something that I've, I guess, struggled with, is that I think you need to set boundaries with where your main job ends and where your secondary side hustle, wherever that ends, because sometimes it can kind of all blend into itself, where you feel like you're working 15-hour days, right? You go from doing your one job to now doing your side hustle, and especially if they're very similar. So in my day job, I'm working on textures and materials. In my side hustle, I was doing courses on textures and materials. And so it's oh man, I'm just working on the same thing for 10 to 15 hours a day. You don't want your side hustles to ultimately consume you, or just add a lot on the back end, so that, it's okay, I feel like I'm working two jobs here. I think it's important to kind of separate it for yourself, however you can do that. But I think having a side hustle is really one of the better things you can do to supplement your own growth for the long run, really.
Yeah. That is something to think about, actually. The other question is, how the hell did you develop your style in doing tutorials? Honestly, you're so amazing. I love listening to your tutorials. Like you're up.
You flatter me.
like honestly, you're up to the point, and I don't know. It doesn't feel boring for me when I'm watching your videos. I have no idea why.
Well, that makes me happy to hear. I feel like I bore myself, so I'm glad that like at least one person is not bored to tears when they're watching my stuff. Honestly, how does one develop any sense of style, right? Like, where does that come from? Like I said, I started doing, well, I guess I kind of implied, I didn't really say it outright, but I started my YouTube in 2017. And that was the time where my college, for those of you who are not in Ontario, Canada, colleges striked for 6 weeks. So I missed 6 weeks of classes. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'm not learning anything. I'm going to start my YouTube. And I found other people's YouTube videos where I'm like, yeah, like I like this. This is kind of cool. I feel like I'm not only learning, and not only staying engaged, but actually engaged with the person that's talking. And I just tried to kind of replicate what I was hearing and how I was feeling to try and then bring that into what I was doing. And really, it's a matter of just getting slightly, like incrementally better with every video. Because you're not going to develop your style immediately, and your style is going to fundamentally change throughout the progression of however long you're doing something. That's just natural. But I think initially it was just latching on to a couple people that I really liked. And I'm like, yeah, this is something I want to try and replicate or emulate. But making sure you find a couple different people, so you're not just ripping off one person's style. You're kind of like drawing a little bit here and there, and then it becomes your own, right? It's what is it? Stealing like an artist, I think, is the saying. So I try to also with my videos like walk the line of being more authoritative, but also coming at it from an angle of like, oh, I'm learning this too. Let's learn together kind of deal. Because the last thing I want to do is be like, this is how it's done. You should do it this way. And then someone calling me out in the comments being like, you're an idiot. This is not the only way to do it. And then I have to read that and be like, yeah, you're right. I'm an idiot. This is not the only way to do it. So, trying to be like, this is the way I would do it. And like my most recent YouTube video, I just discovered how to preserve UVs in Blender. Like I start off by saying like, I didn't even know you could do this. So here's something cool I just found 5 minutes ago. And here's a whole video on it. Making it conversational, I think, has really helped me in the long run.
Yeah, I do understand that because I'm giving courses that is related to cardiac physiology and stuff like hospital stuff anyway. Okay. And I developed, like a lot of people are telling like a lot of students, they love the style I'm doing. And I think about that all the time. And how can I translate my style teaching medical stuff into 3D? And this is something I wanted to tell you, the how amazing the ripple effect. I mean, you decided to start your YouTube channel in 2017, and then you got you started for CG cookies and flip normals. And I watched your tutorial on Substance Designer, and when I watched your tutorial on Substance Designer, I was like, I'll do my own tutorial also. So I went to my YouTube channel, I did one, and And one guy in the comment, he was telling me, you're the most amazing guy who's doing tutorials in Arabic or what's substance designer. It's crazy, honestly. It's crazy. The ripple effect.
Oh, it feeds the ego too. You're like, yes, this one guy thinks I'm the best. Like, you're like, I need more of this. And then it becomes an addiction. So you're like trying to just get better and better. I think as well too, you can't go wrong with adding humor to your education. Even if it's, making fun of yourself. I think a lot of my jokes are just deadpan humor where I say something wrong and then just go like, oh, I'm stupid. I said that totally wrong. You don't have to be a stand-up comedian. Don't try and shoehorn things in to like, set yourself up for a joke if that's not who you are. But I think just trying to stay light and kind of bubbly and using humor sometimes to good effect. There's a couple jokes I've left in videos where I'm like, oh, that makes me cringe so much. And then I'll see a comment and it's like, that joke at whatever time was hilarious, had me dying, love this tutorial. And I'm like, I'm glad someone found that funny.
Yeah.
Because I thought I was being hilarious. And then I'm watching it back as I'm editing it and going, oh, that is so bad.
Like we're always hard at ourselves. I have no idea why. Because I watch every podcast I do because I do the timestamps on YouTube. And one of my friends, he mentioned that I laugh a lot. This is who I am. I laugh a lot. Okay. And I started hearing myself laughing and I started cringing on myself.
You start to hear it more, right?
Yeah. I started to hear it more. It is weird, but like people, honestly, I have no idea why people love my style in the podcast. Like in Arabic, I have no idea how I sound in English, but it's weird. It's weird to think about it. Actually, it's very
well.
weird.
I'm having a good time. So if anyone has a problem down in the comments if you have a problem with this podcast, and I'll fight you.
So my next question is making courses sufficient enough financial wise? Does it make you rich or not?
It hasn't been sufficient for me yet. It depends. There is so much out there in terms of learning content now, like in contrast to when I was learning in 2011. And honestly, even back then there was a lot, but 10 years later, there's a lot more. It's a very saturated market. And so if you're going to make the next intro to Unity course, good luck. Like good luck, because there is a million of them. And it's a matter of finding kind of the right niche for the courses that you're making. Something that's kind of very specific, but still somewhat widely accessible, is kind of like the holy grail of courses, which I don't know if anyone's truly been able to find quite yet. Or if you're going to do a topic that is already been done, a lot of times yours needs to be the best, because why would I buy your course when I can already buy, that one Udemy course you probably see on like Udemy ads for Unity, where they have like 120 hours of content and it's on sale for $16 all the time. So, it's like, if you can't beat that, I don't know why you should really try, because courses take a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Yes.
And then, depending on really how much effort you've put into it, like how do you price those? Pricing has always been the hardest point for me. So I wouldn't encourage anybody to quit their day jobs to make courses full time. What you can do though, if you are interested in starting courses, is, and I keep coming back to it, start a YouTube, start making like one-off videos, and then try and string some videos together. And if you really think you have a knack for doing this kind of stuff too, you can leverage it to start working at places like Flip Normals. I know that they like to really hire people who are passionate about doing courses related to the industry, and they pay relatively well for doing those courses. Now, on the flip side of that, where the real money is at is being the flip normals and paying people to make you courses.
Yeah.
And then you own the rights to the course, right? And you can sell that on your marketplace. And that's where a lot of, you'll see a lot of places do that kind of thing, where they'll get someone who's maybe in the industry and they'll do, you know, like a one-off tutorial series on Substance Designer or ZBrush or something, but they'll put it up under their company, because they've paid this artist outright, likely in most cases, or some royalties. I don't know how it works specifically for each one, but them as a company own it, and then they make money off of the sales, and they've just paid, you know, an outright fee or something. And that's really where a lot of the money in courses is. So I don't think most people starting up are going to be able to just go and start their own tutorial course company and get, you know, prospectful people to come in and be like, yeah, I want to make courses for these people. But if you're in a position where you want to make a lot of money with courses, being the people that pay the guy to make the tutorial, that's the place to be.
Yeah. No. Like there's one guy, I forgot his name. He did a couple of courses, like couple of tutorials in flip normals.
Would it be Emil?
Yes,
Emil
exactly.
Sligers?
There is one tutorial popping out every 3 seconds.
Oh my God. I don't know how Emil does. Okay. So I think he's the owner or something of Fast Track Tutorials as well.
Yeah.
So between doing Fast Track Tutorials and doing flip normals, like, I don't know when this guy sleeps. I really don't. Like him and I, when I was doing more stuff with flip normals, we never really personally met, but we were kind of in the same area a little bit. And I'm just like, dude, how the fuck? Like, what? How are you doing this much content? Like, you're a madman. That's crazy. You're crazy. I'm like, I was doing about 2 courses a month, just, you know, finishing them. And I'm like, I still don't know how this guy has that much time to do these. And then like edit them and then, you know, put it all together. Blowing my mind. But anyways, yeah, back to your point about Emil popping them out like, every 3 seconds.
And he's doing like high quality courses, tutorials. And I watched a couple of his tutorials. And what I like about him is he's very authentic. And even if he makes a mistake, he will go and he'll joke about it and he will fix it. And I love the authenticity there. In like I don't like I would call it a robotic style. Do this, then do this, then click that. I don't like that. And honestly, there is some. Go ahead. You want to say something?
I was just going to say, it's from an educator or lecturer standpoint, I guess. I don't really know what I would call myself. Tutorialer. I don't know. It gets very easy to become robotic in that sense. And it is a constant struggle to be like, no, you got to get out of that and make it conversational instead of, like I was saying earlier, being authoritative and like, do this. It's like, gee, thanks, guy. I could read like a user manual. I was looking for something a little bit more engaging.
Like something you're always doing is you're always explaining why. I mean, sometimes you take the time to go and explain, and you're editing the video in a way where like it helps to explain even more with imagery and stuff like that. You did get this a couple of times in the tutorials I'm watching for you. So this is actually
those take a long time to add.
This is the worst
I don't know if
thing.
I just suck at it, but
the worst thing in making videos is the editing part.
Oh God, yeah. If I could afford an editor, like, oh man, I would be. I mean, I don't make enough money off of my YouTube videos to warrant having an editor, so I'm stuck with it. But like, oh man, it'd be so nice.
Yeah. I don't understand that. So like you mentioned your YouTube. So what's your plans for your YouTube channel?
I think, well, you got any suggestions? I want to focus on a range of software going forward. I know with my YouTube channel, Get Learned has been primarily Substance Designer, but that wasn't really the focus when I started. It's just what I got comfortable doing because that's what I started with. And at the time, there was really no Substance Designer tutorials, and there really still is not a lot of designer channels out there that aren't just time lapses. There's a lot of time lapse channels out there, which is cool, but I have a hard time when you label them as tutorial and then it's a 15-minute time lapse, but that's a whole other topic. But I want to focus on a different range of software, and I want to focus more primarily on open source software. Not that it's going to be exclusively that, but open source has just kind of been obviously what I've grown up using with Blender and stuff like that, and been really getting into using the Godot game, and I think it's really sick. And I want to help open source software kind of be documented. I think a big problem with open source is that documentation is pretty sparse a lot of the time. And so making videos where I can kind of just make video diaries almost, where it's like exploring features and different tools of different software. There's another Material Maker is an open source texture material creator, very much akin to Substance Designer. It's a software I really want to get into because it's, again, still kind of comfortable in terms of like textures and stuff that I've done, but it is a very kind of recent up and coming tool. So I think I'm going to start doing a lot more of that, a lot more series where we're going to create an asset and kind of go through the whole workflow. And I really want, people keep asking me for it, so I think I'm going to just bite the bullet and do it. Like a total beginner's intro to not just like Blender, but like intro to 3D. Yeah. So like, what are vertices? Like, what are normals? What is hard edges, soft edges? What's texture baking? Like that kind of stuff at a very conversational level where it's like, I've never, like kind of back to my story at the very beginning. I didn't even know Blender or like 3D modeling packages was a thing. So like if I'm someone that doesn't even know that, but I see video games and I'm like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. Like this will be where to start. Like you're going to learn the fundamental stuff, because I think you get to a certain point, like you expressed yourself, there's so much to learn and there's not really a clear pathway on how to get from A to Z. Yeah. You know, it's like you from A to C to G back to B, because you realize like there was a gap in fundamental learning, that there just wasn't a correct chronological path to get there. I've been thinking and racking my brain about like, how do I do that? How do I make something where it's like you go from one video to the next and it builds off the last one, but it's showing you the proper steps of like getting into understanding on a fundamental level what it is to be working in 3D. So that is where my struggles are, and that I've said it on, you know, like recorded account. I'm now going to have to do it, unless you'll have to cut this part out, or you can't air this episode, because now I'm obligated.
Now you're obligated. You're going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because YouTube is a weird place, because I just hit my 1,000 subscribers, I think last week.
Damn, double congrats, man.
Thanks. And I made my first $1 like this week, and it's weird. Like you're putting so much effort into like editing, and just like for my channel now, it's a podcast channel. I have like inviting people, arranging time, then listening to the podcast, and just so many things. And that $1 felt so good for some reason.
It's the first of many, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's rewarding for all your hard work, where you're like, yes, my first dollar, and hopefully you can like keep on trajectory where it just keeps going up, right?
Yeah, definitely. So my next question is, what is the most thing you enjoy about like in doing 3D, and why?
Honestly, I hmm, I really enjoy the start of a new project when you're happy and motivated and excited. That's the best part.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And then the last, like, I don't know, whatever percent where you're like, I'm just going to call it, it's done. Those are the two best parts. The doing a part of it, it can suck. It can suck real hard. But it, I like the learning. Yeah. The learning aspect of it. Now more so, I'm trying to, because I'm comfortable in a lot of the fundamental stuff, I'm really trying to tackle new and creative things where it's a skill set I've not really accustomed to. And I just really enjoyed the learning aspect of it, because I feel like working in 3D teaches you a lot of different skills that I think are somewhat applicable to other aspects of your life. Working in 3D, you get familiar with math, right?
Yeah.
And then you want to take that further and understand that more, or you want to get into add-on development and you start programming. Like I started programming because I wanted to make Blender add-ons, which I don't know if I would have ever started programming had I not, been in this. Oh, okay, you can still hear me. Okay, I think I cut out for a second there.
Yeah.
And so I think honestly, I get a kick out of learning, as nerdy as that sounds. But I think that's what kind of keeps me excited about doing it. So it's not really so much I enjoy any specific thing. It's just like, okay, I really enjoy learning. Am I going to be able to learn something from this experience? And if the answer is no, then it's like, I'm not really. I don't want to just go through the motions with doing this. I want to learn something and get something out of it.
Yeah, I do understand that. It's always interesting to ask someone else what do you enjoy about 3D, because it's always a unique answer, in my opinion, like from my experience at least. Because for me at least, the most I enjoy the most, like I'm at my happiest when I sculpt. Okay. I'm still bad at doing like faces, really bad. But the sense of discovery that something is going to be shaped. I don't know if I said this well. I don't know if does it make sense or not. But
yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah, but it feels so good. It feels so good. Like when you start sculpting and then you start seeing these features, and you start seeing the nose and the eyes and the mouth. It doesn't matter, like for me, it doesn't matter how horrible it is. And like by the end of the session, I have something to look at. And like I got rid of the anxiety and what do you call it? You know that feeling when you're always anxious about the outcome, and you're always thinking about like, this is bad. I got rid of that actually. And honestly, all I think about is like improving one step at a time. I don't care, like something will happen in the end. And as I said, I'm at my happiest when I sculpt. So it's always an interesting.
I think I'll get you to do a course on sculpting to a point, because like, man, I need to learn, especially character sculpting. Oh my god, my 3D characters still turn out like characters. So
it's like characters are like super hard. It's like it's a struggle actually, and that's like going back to my point when I said exhausted artists. Most of them were character artists for some reason. I have no idea why.
Yeah, well, and I think too, like I was saying, you learn so much through doing this kind of field, right? Because you have to. With character art, you actually have to really study human anatomy to get it looking right.
Yeah.
And so you now become a master of muscle groups and like human anatomy, which, well, maybe in nursing, I think you probably have a predisposition to have that knowledge. But, you know, for the general person who's like, I just want to model 3D characters. And then you have like textbooks upon textbooks of like human anatomy. And you're like, oh, I know all that? Like I need to memorize that? Yeah, crazy. So maybe that's some of the exhaustion. You're like, I'm just sick of looking at cadavers and, you know, like open exposed muscle groups.
Yeah, like back in college, I hated anatomy. Like in college, we have physiology and anatomy. And we were taking these two classes, and I really hated anatomy. Maybe because anatomy is like it's a stiff subject, okay, with all the names and like how can I put that? When you know in when we study physiology, we study like how the function. It's interesting to think about that, but when we were studying anatomy, at least in my college, I mean, we were studying names, and I remember the lecturer there was, he would come to the class, he will open his PowerPoint, and he would be literally for 1 hour and a half, he will just read the slides. And maybe that's what that's the reason why I hated anatomy in college.
I see. You didn't have a cool YouTuber professor who was teaching you all this stuff. You had a boring university professor. I see.
It's like, you know, like I wish we had an artist to teach us anatomy back in college. The guy who taught us was a surgeon actually, and he was like a very successful surgeon. But like surgeons are they're stiff. They don't have fun a lot. Obviously, I'm generalizing.
Yeah, and I think that actually kind of speaks to an issue that I have with kind of conventional education to a certain degree, is that I think it just could be a lot more. I think with the advent of things like YouTube, but I think more specifically YouTube, you see this, where people are trying to make it entertaining. You have this kind of edutainment, if you will, where you're like, I'm learning stuff, but I'm having fun. And I think that style could benefit conventional teaching, like, you know, with universities, where it's like, okay, make this entertaining or engaging, educational. You don't need to make it fun. I don't need to have fun while I'm looking at human body parts, but, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I want to learn this, or like, oh, okay, I'm actually more engaged in what you're saying and holding on for everything instead of reading out body parts. But
yeah, I think competition plays a big role here. Like in YouTube, if you're not funny, you're not going to get that views. But in college, like you're a professor, you already have this job. Like it doesn't matter. Like
he's already been paid.
Yeah. Like if a student died out of like boredom, it doesn't matter.
Actually just dies in the classroom from being so bored. And they just start studying on him because he's just another body.
Yes, exactly. So like this is actually a perfect segue to my next question. Like because conventional education system is, most of the time, in my opinion, is boring, and it gets people unmotivated. So the question is, what keeps you motivated? in general, like in learning and doing your work and doing your tutorials?
Death, that's a pretty big one. Someday I'll die, and having accomplished something would be nice. But I think for me, in terms of like the YouTube stuff, what would keep me motivated is like just the sheer scale of like people that you can impact, really. Like, again, right, it's it's like 1 o'clock for you where you are, and it's 6 o'clock for me here in Toronto, Canada. Like the fact that we're even having a conversation right now,
it's insane.
It's absolutely insane. And again, I go back to just having that ability, that sheer scale of people that you can engage with and interact with, I think is a really big motivator. A story about a year ago, I think, my mother, I can't remember what it was for, but she was asking my brother and I, just kind of in casual conversation, like some things we're most proud of, like our proudest achievement. And I honestly think, and I had said at the time, like, I think my YouTube channel is probably my proudest achievement. And she thought that was kind of tricky and kind of nerdy, but I kind of laid it out. Like, think about how many people in your lifetime that you've impacted that you don't know about.
Exactly.
Ideally in a positive way, but impacted nonetheless. And you'll never know about that because it's just, a conversation here or an interaction there. With YouTube, it's a little bit different because Google is such a data farming company. I can know exactly how many people have watched my videos, how many people I've come into their lives. And like as of right now, I just looked earlier today, I'm just up of 800,000 views on my channel. Like now it's not 800,000 people, but it's a lot of people that watched the videos and have been like, okay, this is kind of cool. And seeing people in the comments where it's like, much love from Brazil, much love from Argentina or Norway or China or wherever, right? Yeah. It's like back to what you were saying earlier about the one guy who's just like, you're the best substance designer teacher. You're just like, you do it for those ego feeding comments where you're like, wow, like I have interacted with someone on the other side of the world who I'm never going to meet.
Yeah.
And it was a positive experience for them. And I have now become a part of their life somehow. I think that's what keeps me motivated.
Yeah.
Is just the human experience, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a similar experience with the podcast. When I had the 1,000 subscribers, I posted a thank you message for all for people who are following me and stuff like that. And I just asked, like, do you have suggestion, anything about the podcast? And I was super surprised by the amount of people thanking me and telling me, like, one guy in particular, because this guy is like, he's an awesome guy. Like, he is watching every episode. And
nice, he's a power user.
Exactly.
Power fan, yeah, super fan.
And he told me he started watching me in episode 3, and according to him, I'm quoting him, he said he was lost, he didn't know what to do, he did not know what to specialize in, he just wanted, the only thing he knew that he wanted to do 3D. And the 3rd episode was with a character artist. That guy, in 7 months, he's making really good he's making really good faces right now. Okay, like his sculpting skills is over the roof, and I was like, holy shit, this guy is much more better than me.
Well, hello, guy that he's talking about, first of all. I'm sure you're watching this episode. Yeah, that's like, doesn't that feel so good. You're like, oh, you're kicking my ass even. And like, I was the one that inspired you to do it.
It does.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like it's crazy. It's crazy. And honestly, it's a blessing that, like, obviously I love doing the podcast. And it's a blessing that you do what you love, and people, like, you will have a positive like impact on people's life. It's weird, and like it's insane that we have this technology now that we could reach all of these people, and it's insane. It's insane. Like I can't forget about this guy comment, actually, honestly.
There's going to be a couple people in YouTube career where they're going to stick with you.
Yeah.
And honestly, a couple of them I've actually become real life friends with, which is also kind of neat.
Yeah.
Where it's, they have such similar interests and stuff. You actually get the opportunity to meet these people. So it's really humbling. I think humbling is a big one.
One of the guys I did a podcast with, I don't know, he's friends of yours, or you know him. His name is Muhammad, but he has what is his YouTube channel? He's a Houdini guy.
Oh shoot, I can't remember his last name now, but Mohammed. Yes, I know Mo.
Yeah. Like I did a podcast.
Oh, you interviewed him on here?
Yeah.
What? You didn't tell me that. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I'm friends with Mo.
Yeah, like.
Oh, that's okay. I'm gonna bully him after that, not telling me. So.
But like we did it.
Anyways, continue.
Yeah, like we did it in Arabic, and we have totally different accents, and like like. Okay, I'm going to try to explain this as simple as possible.
Okay.
Like all of us speak Arabic, but
yes.
we have like totally different accent, like totally different accent. And
yeah,
like I did a podcast with a guy from Morocco, and we were trying to speak in Arabic before the podcast. It didn't work. We were like, okay, screw it, let's do it in English.
Yeah. Just for the viewers, understand too, we tried to speak in Arabic before this one, but we both realized I don't know how to speak Arabic.
Yeah. Couple of words, only couple of words.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So
that's actually so crazy about Mo. Sorry, I'm just thinking back to that. Like,
yeah,
maybe he showed me this and I've just missed it, but oh man. Now I'm gonna have to go back and watch that. I'm not gonna know anything that's going on, but
like unfortunately we recorded in video, but for some reason there was like, what do you call it, unsynchronized video with audio, something like that, and unfortunately I couldn't get the video out there, but I had we had a deal that we are going to do a second episode talking about his experience in side effect, right? Side effect, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah.
Side effects. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna message him on Discord after this then and be like, can't wait till your next episode. Okay. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. It's this industry is very small. You see, it's very small.
Oh God.
Yeah.
You realize very quickly how small it actually becomes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you are in the industry and you have a YouTube channel. We all know each other.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so I'll get to my, honestly, man, like it's 1 hour and a half almost. I did not feel it, man.
It was like 10 minutes. That was quick.
So like, do you have time for a couple of questions?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Absolutely.
Whenever you want to, like, if I did not finish my question and you want to stop, just tell me, please.
Okay. I'll just get up and leave. I'll just walk off set. Yeah.
So I'll ask the question. I'll answer myself. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, of course you've been in a journey since you started 2011. What year? When you got into 3D?
I started 3D was 2011.
Yeah, 2011. So what is your advice for people who want to get into 3D and for people who want to get into the industry?
So getting into 3D, I would say there's a ton of different courses. Well, depending on when you're watching this, potentially my series that I'm going to put up, but haven't even started it. So if you're watching this when it comes out, I don't have a course for it. But there's a lot of YouTube videos out now, just entire series really, that can take you through a project. And I would recommend centering your learning around projects, because that is the easiest way to get things to stick with you. So finding things on YouTube that are going to teach you relevant skills, foundational skills, and then finishing these projects. This is kind of the biggest thing that I wish I did when I started, was finish the projects you start. And it's going to force you to actually think about what the project is you're doing, because I guarantee you, if you're going to just try your own projects without doing YouTube tutorials, you are going to overscope your project significantly. Like, it's not even going to be funny how bad you're going to overscope your project, because you're like, I want to do everything. And then you realize, oh, I don't know how to do anything. So finish the projects. They're never going to turn out as you envisioned, but that's okay. That is part of learning the process. And start asking questions to as many people as you can very early. I mean, I think this is one that kind of stagnated my own growth. I was kind of anxious and nervous, and I wouldn't like go on forums and ask questions and stuff until much later. If I had asked questions earlier, I would have been able to solve problems earlier. And it's problems that's...
Can you say that
Go
again?
ahead. Yeah.
Can you say that again?
So start asking questions early, because you're going to have the same problems. And it's going to be very, consistent and frequent, the problems you're having, because 3D doesn't change a lot. But if you have a consistent theme of issues that crop up when you're doing stuff, those are gaps in your knowledge. And those are things you need to ask about, because the farther into your 3D career, I guess we'll say, that you get, the harder it is to ask those type of questions, because either it's your ego and you don't want to seem stupid, or other people perceive you to be more knowledgeable about the subject. It gets harder to ask those more fundamental questions the further you are into it. So I wish that I asked a lot of questions when I first started, but I was too shy. I was too reserved. So I think those are kind of the biggest things in terms of like getting into 3D. For actually getting into the industry, my experience has been different, just like everybody's really. I think nobody really comes into the industry in the same way a lot of the times. But for me, it's been a more of who I know, and then what I know is just there to kind of back it up. Back up that I can do the work. But actually getting my foot in the door, really, for the most part, has been other people recommending me. Fortunately, because I've built a network up in that regard. So that kind of brings me to my next point that I want to talk about, kind of still in that frame of mind, though, is building a network. I think is really one of the biggest critical aspects about getting into the industry. And I think it's harder to really know what a network is when you're not really in the industry yet. But just find like-minded people. Find people that are interested in talking about the things that you're interested in. For me, obviously, it was doing YouTube, and people who are interested in the videos I was making. And in turn, I was interested in talking to them because it's stuff I'm interested in. Because that's going to be your professional network someday. People you can go and meet if you're going to post-secondary university or college, right? People in your program are going to be your network someday. So getting on well enough with those people, hopefully forming some meaningful relationships, those are going to be the people that are going to help you get in. And inversely, those are the people you are going to help get in. And I think kind of the last point to that is just finding people that lift you up instead of bring you down. It's a pretty cliched and generic thing, I think, but I think it is something that's good to keep in mind, is you don't want to surround yourself with people that are going to, I think, bring you down if you succeed. If you find success, and they're going to be people that bring you down. It's nice when you have kind of a group of people that you surround yourself with that are good at what they do, or they're passionate and enjoy what they do, because you're going to learn a lot from those people, and it's going to help bring you up. Whether, you feel like you're really improving, you're going to kind of improve as a whole cohesive unit. And I think for me, I'm fortunate that I was able to develop that relationship through, I keep saying it, but my YouTube channel, finding people who are like, I like you, let's be friends. And me going, okay, I like you too. I'm okay with this friendship.
Yeah, like I do agree with you, especially in the relationship part, because what, like I had in a period of my life, I was surrounded by like really negative people. You know those people who don't have anything but gossip, and gossip is the right word, right?
Yeah.
And every time you say like you want to do something, they will put you down and stuff like that. I was surrounded by those people. Like I lost a lot of my friends. Like not lost them, but I'm not seeing them anymore. Like every now and then, like I'll see them
apart.
Yeah.
Right. You grew maybe in a different direction. Absolutely.
Yeah. But this is like really, really an important point. And you mentioned two things actually. One of them is like finishing projects. And this is actually, it's much more harder than it sounds. Like it sounds easy, actually. It sounds easy, but it's really like it's very difficult. I have a graveyard of unfinished projects here in the PC.
Yep. And the problem with that is that works in progress shots are cool, but an unfinished project is an unfinished project.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the stupidest thing I've done.
I have too many to count, so yeah, I'm glad you just have one.
Like the thing is, I have no idea what was I thinking about, and I made a YouTube video about it. It's in Arabic, and I was telling people, for God's sake, don't do what I did, please, because everyone is focusing about tutorials. Everyone is focusing, okay, which is the best tutorial? What tutorial should I do next? I had the same mentality, and I almost bought almost 275 courses. Almost. Like,
whoa.
It's insane. It's insane what I did. Because that dopamine rush when you think about like, okay, like you see a cool tutorial, okay, I'm going to buy it, and
oh my God, this knowledge I'm just going to siphon. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, every time, all the time. Yeah, like 100%.
But honestly, like your tutorials are like, I finished your tutorials. That's why, like, I think
that's a small victory for me.
No, good to hear. It's one of the reasons is your style, and that's like coming back to the point we talked about, like your style. But anyway, like nobody should buy 200 something tutorials. Not at all. I wasted so much money. Like I really wasted so much money.
You have your pick. You have your pick though. Now I think you own every tutorial that existed.
Yes.
It's like 5 terabytes of footage that you have just on a hard drive somewhere.
Like, oh my God. Like I don't, like when I think about it now, like I'm like, holy shit, I mean, but like these, like you have to do some stupid stuff to learn. Like, okay, I'll tell you the second, like I don't know if this is the most stupidest thing or the second stupidest thing. I have no idea. But I got interested in game development.
Yes.
So I wanted to learn programming. So what I did was like, I was learning C++, C#, and Python at the same time. Don't ask me why, but I did it.
Just have all the bases covered.
And like, I remember one of my friends, he's working in Google right now. And he was sitting with me and he was like, Munir, what the hell are you doing? Okay. And he taught me how to learn programming in the right way. So anyway, I'll ask you my next question, which is it's about material art. Obviously, material art needs a lot of observation and stuff like that. So in your opinion, what is the best way to learn material art?
That one's a tough one. I think just because a lot of people come at it so differently. But I think for me, the way I approach it is there's two very big ways or big factors, I guess, that kind of coalesce into material art. One is pattern recognition, being able to identify patterns and therefore deconstruct patterns. Because really that's what you're doing. You are replicating surfaces. So if you're utilizing references, which you should, you need to be able to deconstruct that in a way that makes sense to you. Ideally, you'll know how to use Substance Designer or whatever software you're using to then go ahead and create those different patterns and those different features. But ultimately, you're going to need to kind of deconstruct this final piece that you can see into very simple building blocks. And that's something I tried to teach in my YouTube and my Substance Designer courses is like, yeah, this material looks crazy complex, but really it's just a couple, it's a square that we kind of blurred and then we turned it and then we just tiled it. Like it's really easy if you go step by step. The next one that I think really kind of takes your material art to the next level is understanding height maps. And that sounds like really easy because you're like, oh yeah, a height map, like grayscale image, 0 to 1. But if you really understand the blending of how to basically compose grayscale values together to kind of work to create essentially the surface or the shape of what you're trying to recreate, I think you hold a lot of power because the biggest mistake I see a lot of people doing when they're creating height maps is they're doing just a pure black value and then a pure white value. And like you lose a lot of information, right? And I'm going to get a little pseudo technical here, I guess. But oftentimes when working with a height map, you kind of want to work in the middle range because if you're maxing out your values at pure 1, you can't go any higher than that, right? Like you quite physically cannot go brighter than 1 because that is the brightest possible value. And inversely for 0, you can't go any lower. And so I see a lot of people working with such extreme ranges when really they should be kind of bringing it a little bit closer together. And then that's going to allow you to create information that seems like it's popping out of your material or pressing into your material. And just really getting comfortable with, and I'm actually still mad at Substance because they took my idea and it was a smart idea and I wish I jumped on it sooner. Understanding blend modes and using the blend node, understanding what each blending mode does, say that 10 times fast, but understanding what each one does because they do a lot of like very simple but fundamentally different transformations or like calculations on your images, on your values, right, in grayscale, that like you can really use to your benefit. So really getting comfortable with blending modes is something that I think is it's a step that can't hurt your material skills. And I think you're going to find it benefits you in a lot of ways that you wouldn't have expected, because most people are comfortable with copy, maybe multiply, subtract.
Yeah.
Just a handful of them. And there's like upwards of 10, I believe. So getting comfortable and familiar with just knowing like, oh, I'm going to do an overlay or a soft light or a divide. Unfortunately, I can't go into too much more than that, because like, oh my God, Substance, the official Substance has a lot of good tutorials showing you how to do that. I just want to put it on the record that I did think about that idea of a series of learning blending modes like 7 months before they did it, but I never did it. So,
well, like, why not doing it in your YouTube channel then?
I don't want people to yell at me in the comments like, Substance did this better. And then they're like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Meet me in the parking lot. We could duke it out.
I mean, when you think about like material art and how you learn that and pattern recognition, and have you ever had this experience where everything you see in the world becomes a pattern?
Oh my God. I have definitely gotten some weird looks when I was like taking the bus, because I am staring at things way too long, like staring at walls and like seat patterns and stuff. And you start seeing in materials and you're like, what is going on? It's like when the Matrix just becomes like visible to you now. And you're like, oh, I know what nodes I could use to make that. Like, I know how to make that. And yeah, I've definitely gotten some weird stares on the bus, because I'm just really honing in on a certain surface that I'm like, that's really cool.
Like, I don't understand that.
So.
I remember I had a guy and had a patient, and he had a very unique temporal line. And I was...
I'm curious as to where this is going. Okay.
So I was taking his blood pressure and I was staring at his at his head. Yeah. And the guy was like, what's going on?
Sorry, sir, your pores are just amazing. The vein right there, I just cannot get enough.
Look, it's weird. Like, things we learn changes the world we see. Like, I mean, you cannot unsee that. I don't know if I said that right.
No, 100%.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like I said, you can't. Once you start like seeing the world in nodes, you can't stop seeing it in nodes. You're like, I know what that looks like in grayscale. Like, I know what the height map looks like of that. It's so bizarre. But
yeah, definitely.
That's like, how you start thinking.
Yeah. Like when you look at like anything and you start seeing the wireframes and the topology and so on, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
When it's not exhausting and you're like, oh, I'm just back at work. Oh my God.
Yeah, definitely. So I got like 2 questions for you. I hope you're not exhausted. And
never. Full of energy.
Like it's honestly, man, you're so awesome. And this is honestly a refreshing conversation. Honestly,
me too, man. I'm having a good time.
It's one of the things I like about the internet is the chance to talk to people from other cultures, and like it's awesome. It's awesome. I just love it. I had a podcast with Nikolai. He's a character artist. Like, of course, you've seen his. You know him, Nikolai.
I'm sure I have. I can't think of him right now, though.
His tutorials are all over the place.
Oh, did he do? It was like an ogre or something, or a big. Yes, I've seen it. Yeah, okay, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. I did a podcast with him, and it's awesome. Like, he's from Bulgaria, and you're from Canada, and When I started the podcast, I had this idea that I'm going to talk to someone from each country in the Middle East. And then I was like, no, I'm going to talk to an artist from each country in the world. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, are you marking that off? Do you have like one of those scratch maps or something? You're like, oh, this country's done.
I have a post in Twitter I'm posting that every couple of months where like I'll put the flag. Like for example, let me give me an example. I had in my last post, I had 6 Egyptian flags, which means basically I did like a podcast with 6 Egyptians and stuff like that. So like my ultimate goal to make a post that include all the flags. I don't know if Twitter is going to allow me to do that.
That might be more than 140 characters. Yeah. Might have to be a thread. I don't know.
So anyway, like this is like, it's awesome. It's awesome, man. Thanks for this.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the question is about time, and how do you schedule your time between like personal projects, family, work, tutorials, eating, sleeping, all of these kind?
The long and short of it is I don't, but there's an analogy that was told to me that has kind of always stuck with me. Well, it's not even really an analogy. It's actually something I think they teach you in like time management courses. But someone I know went through this and told me about it, where basically they have you take so there's a bowl, and they actually have you do this, and they give you a bag full of big rocks and then a bag full of small rocks, and they tell you fit both those bags, like empty them into the bowl and make them all fit. And you have to first put the small rocks in, get them all in, and then you put the big rocks in, and it has to be level with the rim of the bowl. And if you put the small stuff in first and then the big stuff in, it doesn't fit. It never does. And the exercise is supposed to show you that you can't prioritize the small stuff and then try and fit the big stuff in. So if you take the big rocks and put them in first and then take all the small rocks and fill them in between the big rocks, then it actually goes flush with the top of the bowl. And that's kind of stuck with me in terms of just having myself constantly reevaluate, okay, what are my big rocks? Like, what is the priorities in my life? And my big rocks are my work, because I really do like what I do, and my family. And so I try and fit the rest of that, courses or hobbies and stuff around that. And so I kind of try and take a pretty solid, hard stance on work ends at 5, and I make a conscious effort not to engage with work after that. I know a lot of people that get sucked back into, especially being online, right? Having like, you get messages right to your phone and all that stuff. You just get sucked back in, and you can't do that. You need to give yourself hard boundaries for a lot of these things in order to know where your priorities kind of end. I'm fortunate that I do have a pretty big family that's very active, and they keep me pretty much engaged and, not just stuck at my computer for 20 hours a day. Because I know I would probably be the one to be stuck at my computer 20 hours a day. That's just who I am. So I'm very fortunate for that. And I think things like Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, I think a lot of it is Twitter. They really promote artists who are pumping out content consistently. Yeah. And like, I'm talking like insane projects that they're just like 2 or 3 times a week. And you're like, when did you have time to do that? Like, I'm looking at that thinking like, I don't even know how I'd start that. And you did that in what, like 3 days since your last post? I don't believe it. For me personally, my personal projects take months to do because I fit it in when I have nothing else and it's just nothing but time to do them. Again, that comes to kind of the big rock, small rock thing. Fitting it in when it is advantageous, I guess, for you to take your mind off of things. You have the time, but not prioritizing it over things that are maybe more important. I have the ability over just lots of years of practice doing it to be like, I'm not going to spend time doing that. I have more important things to do. And then finally with like courses and stuff, it's really just born out of me learning stuff on my own. And then I go, oh, this is kind of neat. I actually want to show other people how to do that. And again, that takes really a long time, or it takes 5 minutes, depending on what it is. Like my most recent video about the UV stuff. I did that in about 20 minutes because I was like, I just learned this. This is cool. But again, setting those kind of boundaries where it's like, I'm not obligating myself to have to get a YouTube video out on a certain schedule. And anybody watching me, unfortunately, that's just not the way I operate. Sometimes it will go 6 months and I won't post a video because it's just not something that I want to obligate myself to. And I think a lot of artists, on top of their work, on top of seeing other people posting amazing work consistently, then feel like, oh shit, I need to step up my game and be working all the time. And I totally get why some people just completely shut off after work and don't want to do anything. And I think hopefully a total callback to the very beginning of this episode, why working on the farm seems more and more enjoyable as, the more you get into the industry, because you're like, it just seems like it's work all the time, but you have to set those boundaries with yourself. So knowing what your priorities are, I think, is your biggest kind of, well, I think it's knowing your priorities is your biggest priority.
Yeah, definitely.
Really.
Definitely. It's a very difficult thing for me, at least, because I'm doing this podcast and I'm also doing it. Obviously, it takes a lot of time, like recording and editing and just posting, and you have to post it on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and then you have to answer people, comments, stuff like that. So many things. And during the last 3 weeks, I told myself, okay, I'm going to do as many episodes as I can with, like, of course, with quality, and I'll see which is my, like, really priority. Like, is 3D art my priority or the podcast? Because, like, honestly, I want to do like 3D more than doing the podcast. I love doing the podcast because I don't know what to do first. So, like, I decided, okay, I'll do. This is what I decided, and I started doing this 2 weeks now. I'll wake up at early morning, like 4:00, 4:30. I'll do my, like, daily routine, like practice and stuff like that, and then I'll go to the hospital. Then I'll come back and do the editing and all of that, recording. It worked fine for me, and that comes back to the thing you're saying, that set your priorities right. And
if you can make it work without forcing yourself into basically working another unpaid job and feeling like you're getting burnt out, then that's, like, all the power to you to do that stuff. Do stuff you enjoy, not because you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy with YouTube, especially too. You almost feel an obligation for, like, I need to upload, I need to post, I need to be active, and I need to keep doing it. And, like, that's tough, man. That's tough just as a full-time job.
Yes.
Let alone really, you've made $1 so far. So, like, you're severely underpaid for the work that you do.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully in the future.
Oh, you'll make your millions. I'm sure of it.
Well, hopefully. So this is my last question, and I love to ask this question in every episode. So what is your advice to yourself when you started 3D and now?
That's a tough one. because it's so rapidly evolving, right? Well, I think I would say the things I said a little bit earlier: finishing projects, asking questions. I would, honestly, I would almost say start making videos earlier. I have not, I learned the most when I'm making videos because I either have to research a lot more for it, or I get people in the comments telling me I'm a dummy. And then I have to then learn, like, oh, right, I am a dummy. Like, they're so right. I think making videos and kind of taking those as opportunities to, what is the right word? I guess record my steps of progression. And this is actually advice I would have for people who are just starting, is the stuff you're going to do when you start out is going to suck. It's going to suck. There's a guy on YouTube I really like, Ryan Kingsline. He calls it
The value of
and
the suck.
I don't know if the Valley of the Suck. Oh, so you've seen it. Yeah.
I was a mentor. Like he was my mentor.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love Ryan. He seems like such a cool guy.
I love him so much. Like he's an interesting, like he has an interesting character, interesting ideas actually.
So perfect. If anyone watching this, you want to watch some things that I think really hit home with me, it would be watching his channel. I don't know if it's his channel's his name or not, but you might know better than I. But you're going to have to get over the Valley of the Suck, because you're starting something new that you've never done before and thinking in ways that you've never thought before. You're going to have to get over the Valley of the Suck. But taking the time to actually document and record at those kind of pivotal moments to look back on, once you get good, because you will get better. Like, oh man, I'm so much better than that old guy. Like the me guy right now, so much better. I wish I did more of that. There's a lot of unfinished projects that I didn't really keep record of or keep track of, but I remember doing. And I just want to see how much better I am now versus back then too. So I think for anybody that wants a little bit of built-in motivation, start taking pictures or videos or something of the stuff you're making, and just keep it somewhere. Keep it in a progress folder or something like that. Because that is going to be so motivational 3-4 months from now when you've gotten better and you can look back on it and go, oh my God, I don't want that to ever see the light of day, but like I can look at it just, privately.
Yeah, definitely. Like I have this, like I'm taking a screenshot of every face I do. And it's really motivating. Like you see, like every time you do a new face, you don't go to the first one. Like I love this idea of like recording progress. I love it. I really love it.
And then with your case specifically, you're like, oh, I'm really struggling with noses. Or you're like, okay, jaw lines are like my thing. I'm like the jawline guy, but I can't sculpt an ear for the life of me, right? Like you start to notice and pinpoint like where your gaps are. And then all of a sudden it makes it really easy to know what you have to do next. You need to find a tutorial on ears, or you need to spend more time studying anatomy on noses. Instead of just being aimless. I think being aimless is really a common plague of people starting off, because like we've talked about, there's just so much to know that you're like, where do I even start? Where do I go next? Like, what do I do?
Yeah, definitely. Chunck, really thank you. I mean, it's 2 hours and 2 minutes now.
Nice.
I mean, it's like, honestly, it was one of the most interesting conversation I had in a couple of, I don't know. It's refreshing to have these kinds
for all of today.
Yeah. No, like honestly, it is. This is the longest conversation I had in English, by the way.
Oh wow! Oh wow, I'm honored. All right, next time if I come back on here, if you take me back on, I'll learn a little bit of Arabic. I can do
Well,
like 3 words.
no, honestly, man, thanks so much. I mean, like, you gave us a lot of things from your journey and stuff like that. I mean, your tutorials are awesome, and just keep doing these, and really keep up the good work. And like, honestly, I'm looking forward, like, what you're going to do in the future, and with your YouTube channel, tutorials and stuff like that. So really keep up the good work, man.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Again, feeding my ego a little bit just to keep me going, keep me motivated. But I've had a great time talking to you, and I hope everybody listening has enjoyed us rambling on for God knows, well, over 2 hours at this point.
Yeah, like, in the future, like, let's do it in the future also.
That works for me.
Why not having you and Muhammad at the same time?
Oh man, we'd fight it out. I'm totally down for that. That is a challenge, Mo. All right, you hear me.
Thanks, Chunck.
All right, take it easy.